Well, guys, I got a little bit of an update. It includes good news and bad news. My anti-walk 4L80 Turbo 400 heavy-duty rear case bushing came in the mail yesterday. So I was out here trying to do some measuring to see, is this thing going to work? Will I need shims to be able to use my Torrington roller bearing to rollerize the rear thrust in the case? Well, after a lot of soul searching and measuring and trying to figure out a way to make it work, I've decided that I cannot use this Torrington bearing with the anti-walk bushing. Here's why. The Torrington bearing centers itself off of the bearing in the rear of the case. So just for demonstration purposes, normally you would have a rear case bushing just like this one, and you would install it from the rear of the case forward until about, I think they recommend around 55 thousandths of the bushing protrudes into the case to act as a locator for this bushing, which would have worked fine because it fits that bushing. Here's where the problem comes. The anti-walk case bushing doesn't install from the back side or the rear end of the case. It goes from the inside, as they call it, anti-walk bushing. So under heavy, high towing, high horsepower, heavy duty load applications, that bearing can't be manipulated or pushed or forced out of the case. So basically this thing will go in from inside the case, whereas the factory bushing comes in from the outside or the back side. Well, here's the problem, guys. This Torrington bearing does not fit over that lipped step on the anti-walk bushing. When you go to the Crankshaft Coalition Turbo 400 build, I'm assuming that this upgrade and this upgrade are two separate suggestions or upgrades that don't actually go together. Okay, guys, the Turbo 400 assembly has begun. One thing I wanted to point out to you guys, especially the DIYers, when you get done washing your transmission case, that really clean bare aluminum oxidizes pretty fast, much faster than you would expect. Tip is, take a lint-free rag, saturate it with transmission fluid, and wipe out the inside of your transmission case. When you get done washing your case and blowing it dry, wipe out or spray down the inside of your case with transmission fluid so that it doesn't sit there and oxidize. Down there in the bottom of the case, you'll see my new anti-walk case bushing. The anti-walk case bushing installs from the inside of the case, and the factory bushing would install normally from the back side. Got my case all wiped down with transmission fluid. The rear thrust washer, I'm basically just kind of gooping it up with transmission assembly goo. There's 3 tangs on your rear thrust washer. Those tangs fit into receptors in the case to locate the washer. What's cool about this anti-walk rear case bushing is it actually takes up some of that slop and positively locates that rear thrust washer as well. Well, guys, let's start putting this rear reaction carrier assembly together. One of the upgrades down inside this reaction carrier, see if you guys can see that in the light, you can see where I have put a thrust washer. Basically from the factory, it comes with a 4-tang plastic or fiber washer as a thrust in that area. One of the just recommended upgrades was using the metal style. Same, this is actually interchangeable with your rear thrust interface to your 3-tang washer on your output shaft. I wanted you guys to be able to see it, you know, just so you'll know what's in there. On this assembly, on the inside, you're going to need to use this Torrington bearing. Now that has that large, I call it just a large, no inner lip, you know, fat face on it. So what they're wanting you to do is lube it up generously, because basically what you're going to do is stick this down in here, and it's going to hold itself to this assembly using that grease. The reason I went ahead and just threw it in the little jug and put it all over everything is because I want to put a little bit of this assembly lube on the bearing, the cup, and everything, so that there's no situation, no dry start situation to worry about. And that stuff will all work out of there. That's not a big deal. You put your first race, then your actual Torrington roller bearings in. Then you could add a little bit. I'm just going to clean my fingers on this, what's left, because there's quite a bit packed into that bearing, and I don't want to go particularly too crazy. But you put your race down, which puts your thrust surface up, and push all that together. So there, you've installed your Torrington bearing on the inside of this assembly. Lube guard assembly goo. It comes in green or blue. Green is the high tack, high temperature, which should be used in the summertime. Blue is just an option they give you that is a medium tack assembly goo that they say you can use in the wintertime during cold temperatures if you choose to. Okay, now that we've got this in position, we've got that Torrington bearing safely glued in there. So what we will do now is we'll take this assembly and drop it down inside of here. Now that's one of the reasons why you heavily glue this Torrington bearing in place, is because you don't want it falling out during the process when you're flipping this thing it down inside this assembly. You have to rotate it just a hair, because the teeth, or whatever you want to call it, has to engage those rear planetary gears that are inside this unit. Another Torrington bearing, and it's going to follow the same general procedure as far as getting glued to this area here. So we're going to throw it in the goo. Try not to go too crazy with it. Throw that in there. Then your actual roller bearing portion. I did wash them really well, so I want to make sure that they got plenty of love down inside of them. And we'll take and put our outer race. Because keep in mind, all these little Torrington bearings, they all three have their own position. Do not mix them up. But when you get these all put together the proper way, they're going to locate themselves with this assembly goo. And I try to wipe off a little bit of the extra, because you don't want to, you know, just go totally crazy with it. But I just want to make sure on first startup that there's no dry bearing situation. Got this area lubed. I went ahead and lubed that inside bushing in this location. I do not want to experience any wear during initial startup while we're trying to get the fluid pumping. Everything is all glued in and hunky-dory. Fits right in there. It's sitting right on that Torrington bearing. No problem, no problems. And we're going to have another metal 4-tang bearing that'll sit here when we set it into the case. But I just wanted you guys to see the process of putting everything in, stacking it up. This is the ring that I had a little bit of trouble getting off because of the way it's made. Don't be afraid of it, because this thing's very strong. Trying to stay out of the way of the camera too. See how I'm having to fight this thing. I mean, it's no punk. If I can get it down over that lip, I can get it in. Boom. Feel that thing snap in there. Take a screwdriver. Just make sure that thing is in there. When you put in a snap ring, make sure it goes into that groove. This is secure. We've got our snap ring. We can pick it up and turn it over. Now we've got an assembly. Notice the hole I drilled in my work table so that I can set this stuff and work on it. Remember when we talked about earlier on disassembly, this gear, if you look at the inside bore, you're going to have one side that's flat cut. You're going to have one side that's beveled. Hopefully you guys can see that one side. It's got a little bevel. That bevel side goes down. And you're going to have to turn it counterclockwise, just a hair. Boom. It's in. So now you've meshed the lower portion of this gear with your rear planetaries. It is sitting on top of that larger Torrington bearing inside of there, and everybody's happy. So now let's move on to the next step.